Could curing the economic cancer that's been killing America for decades be what brings us back as a nation? I'm Nick Knudsen.
I'm Marshall Herskovitz.
And today on The Rising, look, we're not here to bullshit you. Today, you'll learn that we are not shills for the Democratic Party. We're not going to pull any punches on that front. But if we're going to defeat the fascist government that's taken over our country, we do need a functional opposition party that paints a clear vision for a better America. We have to give people an alternative vision for the future. And on that front, the Democrats have utterly failed. But the nation needs them to get their shit together. So pull out your mug of tea or coffee or your whiskey, sit back and enjoy, because today we're talking about one of Marshall's favorite topics, neoliberalism. The economic philosophy that's driven both parties for decades has destroyed our politics and devastated our communities. It's the cancer we need to cure, and Democrats have to lead the way.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, Marshall.
We're back.
Yeah, we're back.
We got
Episode 2.
We got to do it a second time.
Oh, my gosh. Guys, the response to the first episode of The Rising has been overwhelming.
Incredible. I really have to thank so many people for tuning in and talking to other people. We've heard from law professors. It's been kind of an amazing week.
Kind of overwhelming, but great. And so no pressure. Here we go on episode number 2. We did get a ton of calls to the People's Hotline.
Yes.
So 503-212-4600. You can call and leave up to a 5-minute message, and you can remain anonymous 24/7, 365. Please do. Leave us your thoughts. Tell us what we're doing right and what we should be talking about. But should we play a clip of the calls?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
They're great.
Hello, this is Lynn Purvis. One of the greatest frustrations for young adults is the high cost of housing. In California and in many blue state legislatures, we could take a visible early step, and that is to end the state-level tax deduction for mortgage interest and property tax payments on second, third, and investment or vacation homes. The revenue from that change could be directed towards starter home construction, affordable rental supply, and safe transitional camps for unhoused people.
That's exactly the kind of idea we need.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
There are so many people out there, and there's so many organizations, there's so many ideas that are starting to bubble up. What we have to do is bring them together as a nation.
And that kind of fits into a little bit of the topic that we're talking about today, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is Sheila, and I'm from Virginia Beach, Virginia. I just wanted you to know that when I saw The Rising, I started crying. Because this is exactly what we need. So you guys being out there, and Moskowitz and The Rising. Moskowitz knows what he's talking about because he's my age. Anyway, take care, everybody, and thank you.
Moskowitz, Herskovitz, what's the difference?
Just combining Marshall and Herskovitz. No, that's
good.
a really, really
Wonderful.
Nice call. Yeah.
My name is Vicky, and I just finished watching the podcast with Nick Knudsen. And currently, I'm in Nevada, and I run into people that are very Trump positive, and I would like to engage in a conversation to help them change their mind, and I don't know how to do that, and I think that's something that would be helpful if you could start discussing on how to get these people to open their eyes without being confrontational, just conversational. That's all I've got, and you guys keep up the great work. Thank you.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Thank you for calling. And first of all, I love Trump positive, like it's an infection. That's great.
That's great.
But no, I mean, that directly relates to what we're going to talk about today. Yeah.
Directly. And like you said, we cannot win this country back just by resistance. The Democrats have to offer a vision, a positive, ambitious, confident vision that will create a future for Americans. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
So let's get into it. So you mentioned on the last episode that you wanted to sort of divide up the sort of solution set between economic and cultural issues, right? Why is that?
The reason is there's an economic plan that the Democrats could put forward that it would attract people way beyond the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. I think there are so many people in this country who are so upset about what's happened to their lives and how they have to live, that if we can address that in a positive way, we win.
We can bring people together.
We can bring people together.
Yeah. So resistance isn't enough. We need a bold economic vision. There's an implication there that the economy isn't great.
Really?
Yeah, right. But it's not just Trump's economy that's the problem,
Correct.
right? This has been a long time coming.
Correct. It's been a long time coming. And yes, it's that word neoliberalism. And we have to start from the beginning because a lot of people just don't know what it means because it's nonsensical. It sounds like it means liberal, and it means the opposite, okay? I take the definition of neoliberalism to be what Milton Friedman, who was a Nobel Prize-winning economist, said, which was the only responsibility a corporation has to society is to make a profit for its shareholders. And that's how I define neoliberalism. It is the pursuit of profit without any concern for the public good. And although I can understand why people wanted that, after all, economic freedom, free enterprise, I mean, it makes sense.
Free is free.
Yeah, free is free,
right.
But what it's done over 45 years is poison America.
Yeah. And it feels like it's not just about money either. There's like a philosophy behind it. There's a value statement behind neoliberalism.
It puts freedom to profit over every other kind of freedom. And also, it's a myth because free markets don't exist anymore in the United States. We had free markets in the United States until 1890. And what you had in 1890 was essentially a Jurassic killing field where the giant dinosaurs just battled each other, and the rest of us, the little mammals, scurrying around in the bottom of the forest, were just trying to survive. That was what free markets did.
Right.
Until the Sherman Antitrust Act started to turn things around and put guardrails around capitalism.
Right. Yeah, greed is poison.
What I want to talk about is to contrast that killing field. And really, we live in a killing field right now, and we're going to talk about that. Okay. But to contrast that with what happened in the United States after World War II, during what is known as the golden age of American capitalism, from 1946 to 1970, when we built the largest middle class in the history of the world. We talked about that last time. Okay. All right. But what I want to talk about is, why did that happen? There are a lot of people who say America had no competition at that time because Europe was in ruins and the Far East was in ruins. And so there was no cheap labor elsewhere to compete with us. And okay, that might be true. But there was a whole other thing going on, which is that the leaders of every corporation in America had either fought in the war or helped run the war effort. And they had internalized the idea that you put your country first, that the needs of America were more important than the needs of your company. And in fact, the CEO of GM in 1954, Charles Wilson, famously said, "What's good for America is good for GM." Interestingly, people remember it the opposite. They think he said, "What's good for GM is good for America." That isn't what he said. He said, "We're going to serve America."
That's interesting. I actually thought it was the reverse.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's important to point out that, not everything was hunky-dory in the 50s and 60s. There were, there was a lot going on in terms of racism and sexism and homophobia. So, we don't mean to glorify that time period from a cultural perspective, but we're just talking about economics right here.
This is so important. By the way, there were a couple of comments from last week because we talked about that, and it was my mistake for leaving that out. I actually had it in my notes, and I just went right by it.
Right.
We are simply talking about the fact that capitalism worked better in the 1950s than it works now. It's not that everything else was so great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we could talk forever about why that period ended, but it did. Yeah. And by 1980, Ronald Reagan rolled in, and that's really when neoliberal philosophy and economic policy came to fruition.
Yeah. And by the way, the Democrats were in the wilderness at that time. By 1992, Clinton had to embrace neoliberalism to get elected.
Right.
Or else there would never be a Democrat in office again. So it's not like in the beginning, the Democrats sold out. But this is the problem with neoliberalism, is it is fundamentally corrosive and corrupting. And that under neoliberalism, corporate money just started to dominate politics in a way it did not before. And eventually, both parties were essentially bought and paid for by corporate lobbyists.
And now basically 2 generations of Americans have been raised thinking that that's just what capitalism is.
Exactly. I think this is the thing I think about all the time is, again, as the old guy in the room, okay, I remember America before neoliberalism, okay? Right. And what we have to understand is that neoliberalism isn't capitalism. It's a cancer on capitalism. Mm-hmm. It's a cancer that needs to be cut out. And the reason I call it a cancer is that it wasn't just economic damage. It hollowed out the soul of the country because the message people got was that if you care about other people and want to take care of other people, you're a patsy.
Right.
You're a dope, okay? Yeah. Because these guys, these big guys, they only care about themselves. Let's look at it this way. I think it was in 1965, CEOs made an average of 30 times what their workers made.
Oh, that sounds nice.
Yeah, pretty good, okay? Yeah. Today, it's 500 times.
That's unbelievable.
Okay, so tell me, did CEOs become that much more valuable in that time? No, they did it because they could. They took the money because they could. And by the way, it's not just the CEOs. It's actually 5 tiers of every corporation. You have people making in the millions every year because they can. I mean, even the chronic health problems that Americans have now go back to neoliberalism because what you have are these giant food corporations making ultra-processed food because it's cheaper, and we're paying the price.
And for-profit healthcare that prevents people from wanting to go in for care because it's so expensive.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, the economic impact is real on Americans, and you can see it in the data. I have a couple of graphs I'm going to throw up here on the screen. This first one is the story of the American middle class in one picture. Back in 1970, a typical middle-class household spent about a quarter of their budget on housing, less than 20% on food, and just a sliver on healthcare and education. That left over a third of their income free, money that they could spend on savings, vacation, home improvements, sending their kids to college.
Imagine that now. Amazing.
I can't.
No, because it doesn't exist.
Fast forward to today, housing eats up a third of the budget, healthcare's tripled, education costs have more than doubled, and the price of basics like rent and utilities and childcare keep climbing. And the end result is that less than half as much room is left for savings and discretionary spending. So it went from 35% down to 15% now.
That's for the middle class.
For the middle class. So let's talk about the working class. Yeah. So the second graph. In 1970, a working class family spent more of their budget on basics than the middle class did, about 30% on housing, more than 20% on food. But they still had about 1/5 of their income left over. Enough savings for a car, maybe a modest vacation. Today, the picture is bleak. Housing alone takes 40%. Healthcare costs have more than tripled. Education and childcare are heavier burdens. And when it's all said and done, there's almost nothing left. Maybe 5% if they're lucky. And more likely than not, they're living paycheck to paycheck and one emergency shy of going into massive debt.
And you wonder why Americans are so angry.
I do not. I do not.
I think it goes back even to when Clinton was president. Even though the economy was booming, I think that was the moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It felt booming. I was a young man growing up in the 1990s, and it felt like the sky was the limit as far as opportunity. But what was really happening behind the scenes was wealth was starting to be steered almost exclusively to the 1%.
In a major way.
Yeah, in a major way.
Yeah. And by the way, one other piece of this. If the minimum wage from 1968 had grown with our GDP,
oh God,
it would be $26 an hour today. It's still $7.50 an hour.
I think it's $7.25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. $7.25. Forgive me. Yeah. I think Democrats have to admit that this is not just a Republican problem. This is both sides. Okay. Corporate money
absolutely
just took over, and all of these politicians were bound to these corporations and what they needed. And again, it's why people are so angry. I mean, look, when this horrible thing happened, when the CEO of United Healthcare was assassinated, and you saw that explosion online of people happy about it, it was really disturbing. Really disturbing.
Yeah.
Okay. But at the same time, you just have to look at it and go, okay, These people are behaving horribly. But why is this happening? Why are all these people cheering? Because so many people hate their insurance companies, and they hate a lot of other companies because of the way they behave. I'm not in any way justifying the killing or the reaction to it.
Right.
But you have to acknowledge people are angry. They're angry across the board. They're angry at their phone companies. They're angry at their cable companies. They're angry at the airlines. It's like, how many times have I been on the phone with an automated customer service screaming, operator, operator, and my wife laughs at me and walks out of the room because she can't stand hearing it anymore.
Yeah.
This is the way we live now. That's not the way you're supposed to live.
Absolutely.
It goes on. Private equity, buying up 35% of available houses so they can jack up the prices or make people permanent renters, or private equity buying companies and then destroying them and selling them off for parts. I mean, we could go on and on and on. The wreckage from neoliberalism just goes for miles and miles and miles. That's not capitalism. That didn't exist 50 years ago. These are new ways to commoditize American life.
And if I'm understanding the concept of neoliberalism correctly,
we need a new word for that.
We do.
We're going to call it neo-nihilism.
Neo-nihilism would be a little bit easier. Let's do that. If I'm understanding the concept correctly, aren't social media companies are kind of the worst,
the worst
perfect example of this commoditized greed that they're ruining the attention spans of Americans, and the algorithm is king, and the algorithm is making us hate each other, and it's just for profit. That's it.
And by the way, they hire addiction experts to tweak these algorithms to get people so that they go deeper and deeper into radicalism. Okay, let's just make billions of dollars destroying the country, destroying the minds of children, making people hate each other. Let's just make more and more money doing that. I mean, is there an end to that? What's the point? So if neoliberalism is capitalism without any sense of the public good, how do you stop that?
How do you stop that?
I mean, a lot of people want to talk about regulations and laws. The truth is you need a cultural movement. It's almost like a spiritual movement. In other words, this is Americans taking their country back from people who are essentially raping the country. Okay? And the only way to do this is a cultural movement that essentially says we need to destroy neoliberalism, root and branch. We have to destroy this philosophy. And is that possible? Yes, it's possible, because you're not destroying capitalism. You're actually trying to restore capitalism to what it was before this happened.
That feels important because of what America is. I feel like capitalism is so deeply ingrained in the sort of psyche of America.
Yeah. It's not about destroying capitalism. We have to remember neoliberalism is the cancer. Capitalism is the patient we want to save.
That's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah. And I think we don't want to destroy billionaires. We want to make them follow the laws and do the right thing. And finally, we have to say, you can't get rich by destroying America. We're just not going to let that happen, okay? You don't have to do great things for America, but you can't do bad things and still be a billionaire. It's just not going to work.
You sound a little bit like Bernie. Not that that's a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just saying.
I'm glad you said that, actually, because eventually I was going to say that, okay? I think a lot of what I'm saying is what Bernie says, and God bless him for that. And he's been out there saying this for a very, very long time. And he has millions and millions of people who agree with him. What I'm talking about has one huge difference between what Bernie says and certainly what Mamdani says and what, the Democratic Socialists say. And I think that difference is why there isn't a groundswell among Democrats to follow the progressive line.
Well, a lot of people say that's what we should do.
I know, but it's not happening. And it's not happening because our so-called leaders are rigging the game. I mean, let's face it, Schumer and Jeffries are lost right now. They're in the wilderness, okay? They're not rigging anything right now. The reason why there's no groundswell for this progressive view is that it's not really what Americans want. It's part of what they want, okay? But it's leaving out something essential, and that is that Americans actually love capitalism. They love it. They love it. Let's just say it out loud. Americans want to get rich. They've always wanted to get rich.
I want to get rich.
It's like, it's in the DNA of our country. Why did people come here? They said the streets are paved with gold.
Right.
Americans are ambitious. They want their kids to do better than they did. They want to buy things. This is who we are, and it's pointless to say it's not. Why was there an explosion of technological inventions in the late 19th century? Why did America invent the advertising industry and car culture and the iPhone? Because Americans love to buy things. They just, it's just part of who we are. And it's pointless to be ashamed of it. It's just a part of who we are. We're a materialist society.
Yep.
That doesn't mean we're not spiritual and we can't do good things, but let's just admit that we're materialist. And Bernie has no interest in that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And Mamdani is against it. He says he does not believe in capitalism. Okay.
Right.
So the point is, you're not speaking to the ambitions of the American people if you don't acknowledge the importance of capitalism in American life. You go far out in the country, in the most remote farm, you go in the inner city, you go anywhere, what you will find is young people with big dreams that they're told can never come true.
Yeah.
And that's what they have come to believe in this society right now. And that's because of neoliberalism. That's because of the power of these corporations to take all the money away so that people can't pursue the things they want to do. And Bernie's answer to that is that people should get things for free, that we should have free healthcare, free education, whatever it is. And I'm not saying that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But what I am saying is that my understanding from looking at lots and lots of polling is that Americans don't want things for free. They want to make enough money to afford the things they want. That's what they really want.
Yeah.
It's not about that we shouldn't help people. We should help more people. That's great. Okay. But the real help, like I said, is to help them find their dreams.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? It means learning a trade, buying a house, being able to afford childcare, starting a business if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, the majority of businesses in America are small family businesses, and they have to be able to prosper without being weighed down by all the regulations that kill so many of them. If Democrats are perceived as just wanting to help helpless people, we are always going to lose. Of course we're going to help helpless people. But we need to help the people who are ambitious and want to have lives and have dreams and who feel that this system is stifling that. We have to be the ones saying, wherever you are, whoever you are, you're the future of America. We stand behind you and we're going to support you. And that's not a message I've heard any Democrats say for a very long time.
I'm not sure I've ever heard it.
Me neither. But that's what we have to say. What we're really talking about is democratizing capitalism. The 1% is not going to go away, okay? It's time to give the 99% a chance to thrive.
Will the 1% let that happen?
That's a very good question because they control a lot. They control
everything.
Yeah, the media even,
Yep.
Okay. But the good news is they're only 1%.
Well, that's a good point.
When there's a vote,
Yep.
okay? If we ever have a vote again.
Yeah.
I mean, look, this gets back to the problem people have today where they feel like things can't be done.
Mm-hmm.
And they look at this and they go, how are we ever going to overturn this? All right. Well,
It's been done before.
it's been done before.
Oh.
Teddy Roosevelt broke up Standard Oil. That couldn't be done.
Mm-hmm.
FDR created the WPA. That couldn't be done. Anytime you look back in American history, you find that the things we think can't be done got done.
So how do you envision this happening in the current climate then?
Well, we're not talking about confiscating the wealth of the 1%, okay? We're not talking about ending capitalism, and that's why Mamdani, you can love him, he can be mayor of New York, but he cannot be the standard bearer of the party because this is not what most Democrats want. What most Democrats
Americans
want. What's that?
What most Americans want.
What most Americans want. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They want fairness.
Yeah.
They want a fair shot,
Mhm.
okay? So we can enforce the laws that already exist, and we can go back to laws that existed before. For instance, stock buybacks are the worst thing in the world, and they used
Yep.
to be illegal.
Yeah.
Why are they legal now? Glass-Steagall. There are all these things that we used to have, these guardrails for capitalism that we need to go back to. But again, it's not going to just be that. This is a cultural problem.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think about like smoking and drunk driving and how it took decades and decades to get to the point where it changed. And then it changed like that, all of a sudden, and that's what's going to happen with this, because people are so angry about this. We are going to wake up one day or 1 month or 1 year when all of America says, no, you can't do this anymore. You can't profit and destroy us at the same time. And the CEOs and the people in the government, they're all going to understand that all of a sudden it's changed. And the idea is we get back to that idea of communal purpose, that you can't just take from this country. You have to contribute to this country. That's what the framers had in mind. Individual freedom, communal purpose, putting those two things together.
And it feels like we need some pretty serious leadership to help us get there.
I think this is part of the damage of neoliberalism, is that we have a leadership problem across this country, not just politically, not just in our corporations. It's like people don't know how to be leaders anymore. And I think, this goes back to our conversation of last week about good times and bad times.
Right.
And I think, we don't have the people of size to rise up, but we're going to have to do it. We're going to have to find that size.
Okay. So we've been talking about this economic vision that the Democrats could put forward, that's more sort of muscular and that they could take ownership of, that's more about community, where capitalism is more closely linked to the common good. Is there a name for this that's like a better name than neoliberalism?
It's funny because Ro Khanna uses a phrase that I really like, patriotic capitalism.
Ooh. I like
and
that.
I think that really expresses what that is. And I'm not sure Roe's idea is exactly the same as what I'm talking about, but it's not far off.
Okay.
But patriotic capitalism is what we're talking about. It's interesting. I've been thinking a lot lately about John Kennedy. And I've been thinking that all of us got so distracted by his lurid sex life and the assassination and all that, that there hasn't been a lot of thought about what he was as a president. He was actually pretty amazing as a president. And first of all, he wasn't even president for 3 years. Just an unrelenting series of crises that he did not cause. Berlin, the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis. He had to send troops into Mississippi so that James Meredith could go to college. I mean, this is like not even 3 years, okay? He inspired an entire generation. And again, I remember this. I remember when he was elected, okay? And people were so excited by what he represented. The Peace Corps.
Right.
All of these things.
Going to the moon.
Going to the moon, right. Going to the moon. And by the way, saying we have no idea how we're going to get to the moon, but we're going to do it by the end of this decade. Because that's America. We do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard.
Right.
Who says that now? That's what we need now. That's the kind of leadership we need right now. On November 21st, 1963, America was the beacon of hope for the entire world. Even the Russians looked to America. Everybody knew America was this shining place. It was the future. And then he was killed. And in some weird way, even though it's so many years ago, I'm not sure we ever recovered from that moment. I think so many follow-on events and the other assassinations and all the problems and then neoliberalism, it's like we've been in the wilderness since that moment. And we've got to get that back. We have to be the beacon of hope for the world again. And we have to start now.
Well, this feels like a good stopping point. Thanks for closing on a message of hope. We are so excited to continue this ride with the Rising.
Too.
So if you want to take action, go to our Substack. It's www.thedangerousones.com. And today's post will have some actions that you can take related to our show today. And don't forget that you can call 503-212-4600. That's the People's Hotline. You can call 24/7, 365. And you can leave up to a 5-minute message and remain anonymous. And if you'd like to support this show, you can scan the QR code on your screen, or you can click the link in the description to go to our donation page. We can't thank you enough. Everybody, Marshall, thank you so much for today's episode. This was great.
Thank you.
And everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. And please remember, if we think big, meet fear with courage, and build community, we can all rise together. Thanks.
Amen.